Hi, I'm Ed Marsh. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Signals from the OP, where I tackle the strategic issues that should be of importance to manufacturers worried about consistent, predictable revenue growth. Today we're going to talk about an existential risk that's facing manufacturers that's very similar to one that they faced a couple decades ago that I would contend most industrial manufacturing companies never actually overcame. I was a young salesperson in the early 90s. I just got out of the Army and I wanted to learn business, and I figured the best way to learn business was to sell. And I happened to enter the industrial market in the Northeast at around the time that import competition really became a significant pressure. So I had the opportunity to learn from veterans, or to hear from veterans that had been in markets for a long time, but also to hear from buyers who were delivering suddenly a very specific message about what their expectations were. But you know how the story goes. I mean, at that time, manufacturers were kind of motoring along, very content, making some money, making products, growing gradually, and the world was pretty stable as far as they were concerned. Suddenly, though, they were inundated with expectations and demands of low price, short lead time, higher quality, etc. And this was really kind of anathema to the way that many of them ran their businesses. So, you know, the story, in the end, many of them failed. Some of them kind of hobbled along, maybe they were acquired, and a few thrived. Those that thrived were those that actually improved their manufacturing. They took a very rigorous, very cerebral approach to their operations. They broke things down step by step. They implemented lean. They got Six Sigma experts. They did all this stuff, Kaizen, everything, and they know exactly what's happening in their manufacturing operations. And that allowed them to reduce defects, improve quality, engineer quality in, reduce lead time, do batches and have consistent tack times and all that kind of stuff that's part of the standard manufacturing lexicon that we have today. As a result, they kind of revitalized American manufacturing. And the folks that had particular expertise in this and led this effort, the disciples of Deming, if you will, are celebrated as American heroes for having led that revitalization of American manufacturing. It's been so successful, in fact, that many companies, when they face any sort of a problem in their operation, they kind of naturally they default to that process. Let's Kaizen it. Let's pull together a multidisciplinary team. Let's understand where the waste is. Let's eliminate the waste or the muda. Let's figure out how to make it more efficient, how to eliminate mistakes, etc. And so it's become almost embedded in the American business psyche that when you have a challenge, that's the way you approach it. The problem is, and where the risk lies, is that the manufacturing issues were actually, I think, a byproduct of the bigger issue. And the bigger issue hasn't been addressed. And so that's why I say lean is not the answer to the challenge that I think manufacturers are facing today. Manufacturing is not and was not the problem. Listening to buyers is the issue. So, we were told things like, those veteran salespeople that I worked with would pull me aside and say, don't worry about what that customer is telling you. They'd almost guffaw and scoff at it. They'd say, well, they can demand whatever they want, but the physical realities of the world is that you can't have all that. So you get price, quality, and lead time, pick two, and that's just the nature of the world. Manufacturers didn't listen to buyers back then, because what buyers were saying was they could get this somewhere. They needed this. In order for them to do JIT manufacturing for their customers, they needed consistent quality, short lead times, just-in-time deliveries themselves, etc. And manufacturers just kind of laughed at it, said, oh, it's not possible, you're dreaming, we can't do that for you. So they went and they found it somewhere they could. As American manufacturers adapted, they improved their manufacturing so they could deliver on the expectations, but the fundamental challenge remains. They never really listened to what the buyer expectations were, and that's repeating itself today. Here's what I mean. Today, buyers are talking about other kinds of expectations. They're talking about PaaS, product as a service. They're talking about data. They're talking about incorporating some of the buying processes and business models that they've come to appreciate in their lives as consumers into their lives as business people. And this is accelerating as the rising levels of management in facilities represent the millennial generation and others that have grown up and been more accustomed and comfortable with this sort of approach. Manufacturers are still not listening, in my estimation, in many cases. Of course, there's exceptions, but in many cases, they're not listening. A great example is IoT, Internet of Things. When you talk to many manufacturers, they put these sensors into their machines or their products, and they think that the focus is the technology of the sensor. And it completely overlooks that the ecosystem of the data is really where the opportunity is. It's an opportunity for the customers to extract more value from their business investments, but it's also an opportunity for the manufacturers to provide more value, even create new revenue streams, even create new products around the data and around the combination of their products and data and customer expectations. So that's the risk. Buyers are being ignored again. Buyers are speaking explicitly by making requests of manufacturers. Buyers are speaking implicitly by the kinds of things they're searching, the sorts of products that they're trying to buy, the experiences they have in their wearing their consumer hat that they want to apply to their business environment. But manufacturers in many cases aren't listening. So I think, unfortunately, manufacturers face the same risk of kind of a really existential crisis that shakes manufacturing to the core in much the same way that happened in the late 80s and early 90s. Hopefully I'm wrong, and each manufacturer has an opportunity. The board has an obligation to explicitly request of management the strategy be developed in a forward-looking kind of way, not a retrospective sort of way. And senior management has the opportunity and the obligation to lead that process. But not every company is going to, just like many companies scoffed at the expectation of buyers in the early 90s and gave them the, quality, price, lead time, pick two, and you're silly for asking otherwise kind of an attitude. That's the opportunity. That's the risk. If you enjoy this kind of contrarian look or irreverent look at some of the big issues facing industrial manufacturers, I'd welcome you to join me for ongoing episodes of Signals from the OP. You can subscribe at signalsfromtheop.com. Thanks very much. Thanks for joining me. I'm Ed Marsh.